The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training compound as Sarah Mitchell stood in the equipment line with 30 other recruits. At 22 years old, she had joined the Army to prove something to herself and to a world that constantly underestimated her. Standing barely 5 feet 4 inches tall with a slight build, she often heard whispers about whether she belonged among the soldiers preparing for deployment. The quartermaster sergeant, a burly man named Rodriguez with 20 years of service under his belt, moved down the line distributing weapons and gear. Each recruit stepped forward, received their assigned rifle, and moved to the next station. Sarah watched as soldier after soldier was handed their M4 carbine with practiced efficiency. When her turn came, she stepped forward with confidence despite the butterflies in her stomach. "Private Mitchell reporting for weapon assignment, Sergeant." Rodriguez looked down at his clipboard, then at Sarah, then back at his clipboard with a puzzled expression. He flipped through several pages, searching for something that clearly wasn't there. "Mitchell, Sarah?" he asked, looking confused. "Yes, Sergeant. Private Sarah Mitchell." The sergeant continued shuffling papers while other recruits began to gather around, curious about the delay. Rodriguez called over his assistant, Corporal Jenkins, who brought another set of documents. "Sir, there seems to be some kind of error in the system," Jenkins whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Private Mitchell's name appears on the roster, but there's no weapon assignment code next to it." A few snickers rippled through the group of waiting soldiers. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she maintained her military bearing, standing straight with her eyes forward. Rodriguez scratched his head and looked at Sarah again, this time more carefully examining her small frame. "You sure you're supposed to be here, soldier? Maybe you're looking for the administrative building? They might need help with paperwork or something." The snickers grew louder. One recruit, a tall guy named Patterson, spoke up from the back of the line. "Maybe they ran out of toy guns, Sarge." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "Sergeant, I completed basic training with the same scores as everyone else here. I qualified expert marksman on the rifle range. My orders clearly state I'm assigned to this unit for advanced combat training." Rodriguez seemed genuinely perplexed. He'd been doing this job for years and had never encountered a situation quite like this. The computer system showed Sarah's name on the active duty roster, but the weapon assignment field remained blank, as if someone had deliberately left it empty. "Look, Mitchell," Rodriguez said, trying to be diplomatic while dealing with the growing crowd of amused onlookers. "Why don't you head over to the company office and sort this out with the first sergeant? I'm sure it's just a clerical error." "But, Sergeant, I need my weapon for today's training exercise. The whole unit is supposed to participate in tactical maneuvers starting at 900 hours. Patterson laughed openly now. "What's she gonna do? Throw rocks at the enemy?" Even some of the other soldiers who had initially seemed sympathetic began to chuckle. Sarah realized that her credibility was crumbling with each passing moment. If she walked away now without her rifle, she would forever be seen as the soldier who couldn't even get her basic equipment. "Sergeant Rodriguez," she said, her voice carrying a note of determination that surprised even her. "I'm requesting that you issue me a rifle according to standard military protocol. I have completed all required training, passed all necessary examinations, and my orders authorize me to participate in all unit activities." The laughter around her grew more pronounced. Someone in the back made a comment about little girls playing army, which drew even more chuckles from the crowd. Rodriguez looked uncomfortable now. He was caught between following procedure and dealing with what seemed like an administrative mix-up. The longer this went on, the more embarrassing it became for everyone involved. "Mitchell, I understand your frustration, but I can't just hand out weapons without proper authorization in the system. That's how people get in serious trouble." Sarah's mind raced. She knew that backing down now would essentially end her military career before it really began. Word would spread throughout the base that she couldn't even handle basic equipment assignment. She would be relegated to desk duty or transferred out entirely. Taking a deep breath, she decided to make one final appeal, speaking loudly enough for everyone in the area to hear clearly. "Sergeant, I am formally requesting standard military equipment for an active duty soldier. I have met all requirements, completed all training, and I am prepared to serve my country with the same dedication as any soldier here." The laughter reached its peak. Patterson was practically doubling over, and even some of the sergeants observing from nearby were smirking at the spectacle. Just as Rodriguez was about to send Sarah away to deal with paperwork, the entire area fell suddenly silent. The change was so abrupt and complete that it seemed like someone had turned off a switch. Every soldier in sight had snapped to attention, their eyes focused on something behind Sarah. She could feel the shift in atmosphere but didn't dare turn around to look. The playful mockery of moments before had been replaced by tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. Rodriguez's face had gone completely pale. His hands, which had been casually holding his clipboard, now trembled slightly. Jenkins dropped his pen, and it clattered loudly on the concrete in the sudden silence. Heavy footsteps approached from behind Sarah. She could hear the distinctive sound of polished military boots moving with purpose and authority. Still, she maintained her position at attention, staring straight ahead at Rodriguez, who looked like he might be sick. The footsteps stopped directly behind her. A shadow fell across her shoulders as someone much taller moved into position. "What seems to be the problem here, Sergeant?" The voice was deep, commanding, and carried the unmistakable authority of high rank. Sarah had never heard it before, but something about the tone made her spine straighten even more. Rodriguez stammered as he tried to respond. General Morrison, sir. There's been a small issue with equipment assignment for Private Mitchell here. Some kind of computer error, sir." General Morrison. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had heard the name whispered around the base with a mixture of respect and fear. He was known as one of the most decorated combat veterans in the Army, a man who had earned his rank through decades of distinguished service in the world's most dangerous places. "Computer error?" The general's voice carried a note of skepticism that made Rodriguez flinch visibly. "Yes, sir. Her name is on the roster, but there's no weapon assignment code. I was about to send her to the company office to sort it out." Sarah could hear the general moving slightly, and she sensed that he was now looking at her rather than Rodriguez. The sensation of being examined by someone of such high rank was almost overwhelming. "Private Mitchell," the general said, his voice now directed at her. "Look at me." Sarah executed a perfect about-face and found herself staring up at a tall, imposing man in his 50s. General Morrison had steel-gray hair, intense blue eyes, and a face that had been weathered by years of military service. His uniform was immaculate, and his chest was covered with ribbons and decorations that spoke of a career filled with dangerous missions and extraordinary service. But what struck Sarah most was the way he was looking at her. Not with the amusement or skepticism she had been encountering all morning, but with a focused intensity that suggested he was seeing something others had missed. "You served in Afghanistan?" he asked quietly. Sarah was confused by the question. "No, sir. This is my first assignment after basic training." The general's eyes narrowed slightly, and he studied her face more carefully. Something was clearly bothering him, as if he was trying to remember something important. "What's your full name, soldier?" "Private Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell, sir." General Morrison was quiet for a long moment, continuing to stare at Sarah with an expression that was becoming increasingly troubled. The silence stretched on until everyone present began to feel uncomfortable. Finally, Rodriguez cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, should I send Private Mitchell to the company office to resolve the equipment issue?" The general's head snapped toward Rodriguez with such sudden intensity that the sergeant actually took a step backward. When Morrison spoke, His voice carried a tone that made every person within hearing distance feel a chill run down their spine. "Sergeant, has anyone in this unit heard of the designation Black Talon mark?" The question seemed to come out of nowhere, and Rodriguez looked completely bewildered. "No, sir. I'm not familiar with that designation." General Morrison's expression grew even more serious. He looked around at the assembled soldiers, all of whom were still standing at rigid attention, then back at Sarah. Black Talon Mark is a classification that appears on the records of soldiers who have demonstrated exceptional combat effectiveness in classified operations. It's not something that shows up in standard personnel files. Sarah felt her confusion growing. She had never heard of any such designation, and she certainly had never participated in any classified operations. She was fresh out of basic training with no combat experience whatsoever. "Sir, I think there might be some mistake," she began, but General Morrison held up a hand to silence her. "Soldier, I need you to think very carefully. Have you ever used any other name? Any family name that might be different from Mitchell?" Sarah's mind raced. The only other name she had ever used was her mother's maiden name, which she had used on some school paperwork years ago when her parents were going through divorce proceedings. "Sir, my mother's maiden name is Bennett, Sarah Elizabeth Bennett. I used that name on some documents when I was younger, but I've been Mitchell since my parents remarried." The effect of her words on General Morrison was immediate and dramatic. His face went completely white, and for a moment he looked as if he might lose his balance. The clipboard in Rodriguez's hands clattered to the ground, but no one moved to pick it up. "Bennett," the general whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. "Sarah Elizabeth Bennett." The way he said the name sent a shiver through everyone present. It was as if he had just spoken the name of a ghost. General Morrison turned to Rodriguez with an expression that was now deadly serious. "Sergeant, I want you to listen to me very carefully. You will immediately issue Private Mitchell the finest rifle in your inventory. You will provide her with any additional equipment she requests, and you will ensure that every person present here today understands that this conversation never happened." Rodriguez nodded frantically, but his confusion was obvious. "Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir. But, sir, can I ask why?" General Morrison looked back at Sarah, who was still standing at attention but feeling completely bewildered by everything that was happening. "Because, Sergeant," the general said in a voice barely above a whisper, "Sarah Elizabeth Bennett is supposed to be dead." The silence that followed this statement was absolute. Every person present felt as if the ground had shifted beneath their feet. Sarah's mind reeled as she tried to process what she had just heard. "Sir," she managed to say, her voice barely steady, "I don't understand. I'm very much alive, and I've never been involved in any military operations before basic training." General Morrison studied her for another long moment, then made a decision that would change everything. "Private Mitchell, you're coming with me. Now!" Sarah followed General Morrison across the base in stunned silence, her mind spinning with questions she didn't dare ask. They walked past training grounds where soldiers practiced maneuvers, past administrative buildings where clerks hurried about their daily tasks, and finally toward a section of the base she had never seen before. The building they approached was different from the others. It was smaller, more secure, with no windows and only one entrance that was guarded by 2 military police officers who snapped to attention as the general approached. Morrison showed his identification and gestured for Sarah to follow him inside. The interior was nothing like the rest of the military facilities she had seen. Instead of the typical institutional hallways and offices, this building felt more like a high-security intelligence center. There were multiple checkpoints, biometric scanners, and security cameras at every turn. They eventually entered a small conference room where General Morrison motioned for Sarah to take a seat across from him at a metal table. The room was sparse, containing only the table, 2 chairs, and a large filing cabinet that appeared to be heavily secured. Private Mitchell, the general began, his voice now more controlled but still carrying an undercurrent of tension. I'm going to share some information with you that is classified at the highest levels. What I'm about to tell you cannot leave this room, and your life may depend on understanding the gravity of this situation. Sarah nodded, though her confusion was growing by the minute. Yes, sir. General Morrison opened the filing cabinet and retrieved a thick folder marked with multiple security classifications. He placed it on the table but did not yet open it. 18 months ago, I was commanding officer for a highly classified operation in Eastern Europe. The mission involved a team of specialists who were tasked with infiltrating a terrorist cell that had obtained weapons-grade plutonium. The operation was designated Black Talon, and every member of the team was given the mark designation for security purposes. He paused, studying Sarah's face carefully as he continued. The team consisted of 5 individuals, all highly trained operatives with years of experience in covert operations. The mission was successful in preventing a major terrorist attack, but it came at a terrible cost. 4 members of the team were killed during extraction, and the 5th member disappeared and was presumed dead. Sarah listened intently, but she still couldn't understand how any of this related to her. She had never been involved in any covert operations, never even left the United States before joining the Army. General Morrison opened the folder and pulled out a photograph, which he placed face down on the table in front of her. The 5th team member, the one who disappeared, was a young woman approximately your age. She was an expert marksman, trained in multiple forms of combat, and had demonstrated exceptional courage under fire. Her code name for the operation was Shadow 7. He flipped the photograph over, and Sarah gasped. The woman in the picture looked almost exactly like her. Same height, same build, same facial features, even the same color hair. If Sarah hadn't known better, she would have sworn she was looking at a picture of herself. Her real name, General Morrison continued, was Sarah Elizabeth Bennett. Sarah stared at the photograph, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. Sir, this is impossible. I've never been involved in any military operations. I just finished basic training 3 weeks ago. There has to be some kind of mistake. General Morrison pulled out another document from the folder. According to our records, Sarah Bennett was born in Denver, Colorado on March 15th. Her parents divorced when she was 12, and her mother remarried a man named Mitchell. She used her stepfather's name throughout high school, and when she initially applied to join the military. Every detail he mentioned was accurate to Sarah's life. She felt as if someone had been watching her for years, documenting her every move. Sir, those details are correct, but I'm not the person in this photograph. I've never been a covert operative. I've never even fired a gun in combat. The general leaned back in his chair, studying her with the same intense expression he had worn outside. Private Mitchell, I personally recruited Sarah Bennett for the Black Talon operation. I trained with her for 6 months before the mission. I watched her demonstrate shooting skills that defied belief and tactical awareness that saved lives. He pulled out more photographs from the folder, showing various training exercises and briefings. In each picture, the woman who looked like Sarah was demonstrating advanced military techniques that were far beyond anything taught in basic training. I know this is confusing, Morrison continued, but I need you to think very carefully. Is it possible that you have gaps in your memory? Any periods of time that you can't account for? Sarah thought back over the past few years of her life, searching for anything unusual. Most of her recent history was clear in her mind, graduating high school, working part-time jobs, deciding to join the Army, going through basic training. But as she concentrated, she began to notice something strange. There was a period about 2 years ago, during the summer after she turned 20, where her memories seemed fuzzy. She remembered starting that summer working at a local retail store, But by the time fall arrived, she was working at a completely different job, with no clear recollection of how or when she had changed positions. There might be a few months that I don't remember clearly, she admitted reluctantly. But people forget things all the time. That doesn't mean I was a secret agent. General Morrison leaned forward, his expression becoming more intense. What do you remember from the summer you turned 20? Sarah concentrated harder, trying to bring up specific memories from that time period. The more she focused, the more she realized how little she actually remembered. There were fragments, images of unfamiliar places, faces of people she couldn't identify, and most disturbing of all, memories of handling weapons with an expertise she shouldn't have possessed. I remember some things that don't make sense, she said slowly. Images of places I've never been, people I don't recognize. And sometimes I have dreams about using military equipment that I'd never seen before I joined the Army. General Morrison nodded grimly. Memory suppression is a technique sometimes used in classified operations to protect operatives and maintain security. If something went wrong during extraction, if Sarah Bennett was injured or traumatized, it's possible that memories were suppressed to protect her psychological well-being. The implications of what he was saying began to dawn on Sarah. If what he was telling her was true, then she had lived an entire life that she couldn't remember. She had been a trained operative, had participated in dangerous missions, and had somehow lost all memory of these experiences. But why would I end up back in the military? She asked. If I was already a soldier, why would I go through basic training again? Sometimes when memories are suppressed, individuals gravitate toward familiar environments and activities, Morrison explained. Your subconscious mind might have retained certain skills and preferences, even if your conscious mind forgot the experiences that created them. He pulled out one final document from the folder, this one marked with even more security classifications than the others. There's something else you need to know. The terrorist organization that Black Talon was targeting wasn't completely eliminated. Intelligence reports suggest that surviving members have been actively searching for the operatives who destroyed their operation. If they discover that Sarah Bennett is still alive, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Sarah understood the implication immediately. They would try to kill me. Yes. And if your memory suppression begins to break down, if you start remembering details about the operation, you could become an even bigger target. Sarah felt overwhelmed by everything she was learning. In the space of one morning, her entire understanding of her life had been turned upside down. She was apparently not just a new recruit, but a trained operative with a dangerous past that she couldn't remember. What happens now? She asked. General Morrison closed the folder and locked it back in the filing cabinet. Now we have to figure out how much you remember and how much danger you're in. We also have to decide whether to attempt to restore your memories or to continue protecting you through continued suppression. Is it safe to remember? I don't know, Morrison admitted. The memories could help you protect yourself if these terrorists find you, but they could also be traumatic enough to cause serious psychological damage. Sarah sat in silence for several minutes, trying to process everything she had learned. Finally, she looked up at the general. Sir, I need to ask you something. The way you reacted when you saw me this morning, the way you seemed to recognize me immediately, you cared about Sarah Bennett, didn't you? General Morrison was quiet for a long moment before answering. Sarah Bennett was one of the finest soldiers I've ever commanded. She was brave, intelligent, and dedicated to protecting innocent people. When we lost her, it was one of the most difficult losses of my career. And now you're not sure if I'm her or just someone who looks like her. That's exactly right. Sarah stood up from her chair and walked to the window, even though it was covered with security blinds that prevented her from seeing outside. She needed a moment to think about everything she had learned. When she turned back to face General Morrison, her expression was determined. Sir, I want to know the truth about my past. Whatever the risks, whatever the consequences, I need to understand who I really am." General Morrison studied her for a moment, and Sarah could see that he was making a difficult decision. "Very well, Private Mitchell, but understand that once we start down this path, there's no going back. If you recover these memories, your life will change permanently." "I understand, sir." The general picked up a secure phone from the table and dialed a number. When someone answered, he spoke briefly and then hung up. "I'm arranging for you to meet with a specialist who can help determine the extent of your memory suppression and the safest way to proceed with recovery. But Mitchell?" "Yes, sir?" "Until we know more about your situation, you're going to need protection. The terrorists who are looking for Sarah Bennett are extremely dangerous, and if they've discovered that she might still be alive—" Before he could finish his sentence, an alarm began blaring throughout the building. Red lights flashed in the hallway, and they could hear the sound of running footsteps and shouted commands. General Morrison immediately grabbed his radio. "Morrison here, what's the situation?" The voice that came back was tense and urgent. "Sir, we have a security breach. Unknown hostiles have penetrated the perimeter. They appear to be heading for Building 7. Building 7 was exactly where they were. Morrison grabbed Sarah by the arm. "We need to move. Now." As they headed for the door, Sarah felt a strange sensation washing over her. Her heart rate increased, but instead of feeling panic, she felt a cold, focused calm that she had never experienced before. Her hands moved automatically to check for weapons that weren't there, and her eyes began scanning the environment for tactical advantages and escape routes. For the first time since this morning's conversation started, Sarah Bennett was beginning to remember who she really was. The alarm continued to blare as General Morrison led Sarah through corridors she had never seen before. Her mind was racing, but not with the confusion and fear she would have expected. Instead, she found herself automatically noting exit points, security camera locations, and potential defensive positions. Knowledge she shouldn't possess was flowing back into her consciousness like water breaking through a dam. "Sir," she said as they moved quickly down a hallway lined with reinforced doors, "I think I'm starting to remember things." Morrison glanced at her while maintaining their rapid pace. "What kind of things?" "Building layouts, security protocols, combat procedures. It's like muscle memory, but for my brain." They reached a heavy security door marked Emergency Operations Center. Morrison placed his palm on a biometric scanner, and the door clicked open to reveal a room filled with monitoring equipment and communication systems. Several military personnel were already inside, coordinating response efforts. "Report," Morrison commanded as he entered. A young lieutenant looked up from a bank of monitors. "Sir, we have at least 6 hostiles who breached the outer perimeter approximately 8 minutes ago. They're moving with precision and seem to know exactly where they're going. Security cameras show they're carrying advanced weapons and wearing body armor. Do we have identification?" "Negative, sir. They're wearing masks and using communication scramblers. But, sir, they bypassed several high-value targets and are moving directly toward this building." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "They're not here for the facility. They're here for me." Morrison turned to look at her. "What makes you say that?" "Because that's exactly how I would approach this target if I were trying to extract someone specific." The words came out of her mouth before she consciously thought them. She was speaking from knowledge and experience that she couldn't consciously access, but which was clearly still present in her subconscious mind. The lieutenant monitoring communications suddenly looked up with alarm. "Sir, they've reached the main building. Security teams are engaging, but these hostiles are extremely well trained. They're neutralizing our people with precision that suggests military or special forces background." Morrison grabbed a secure radio and began issuing orders to coordinate the base's response. Sarah found herself studying the tactical display screens, automatically analyzing the movement patterns of the attacking force. "General," she said, interrupting his radio conversation, They're using a classic extraction formation. Three-team approach with Overwatch support. They'll have the building surrounded within minutes, and they'll breach from multiple points simultaneously to prevent their target from escaping. Morrison stared at her. How do you know that? Sarah paused, realizing that she was drawing on training and experience that she still couldn't fully remember. I don't know how I know, but I know I'm right. The radio crackled with urgent reports. Security teams throughout the base were reporting contact with the hostile force, but the attackers were moving with deadly efficiency. They had clearly studied the base layout and security protocols in advance. "Sir," the lieutenant called out, "they've breached the main entrance to Building 7. Estimate they'll reach this level in less than 3 minutes. Morrison made a quick decision. "We're evacuating to the secondary command center. Lieutenant, initiate lockdown protocol for this facility and call for backup from Fort Campbell." "Yes, sir." As the team began shutting down equipment and preparing to evacuate, Sarah felt another wave of returning memories. This time, instead of tactical knowledge, she was remembering faces and voices from the Black Talon operation. She remembered working with a team of highly trained specialists. She remembered months of preparation for a mission that involved infiltrating a terrorist cell in Eastern Europe. And most clearly, she remembered the moment when everything went wrong. "General," she said quietly, "I remember the extraction." Morrison stopped what he was doing and looked at her intently. "What do you remember?" "The mission was successful. We had secured the plutonium and identified the key members of the terrorist network. But during extraction, we were ambushed. Someone had betrayed us." The memories were coming back more clearly now, and with them came a flood of emotions that Sarah wasn't prepared to handle. She remembered the faces of her teammates, good people who had died because someone had sold them out. There was a leak in the operation. Someone with high-level access had provided our extraction route to the terrorists. That's why the ambush was so perfectly timed. Morrison's expression grew very serious. "Do you remember who the leak was?" Sarah concentrated, trying to access more of her suppressed memories. The information was there, she could sense it, but it remained frustratingly just out of reach. "I remember investigating the leak during the mission. I had identified 3 possible sources, but before I could report my findings, the ambush happened. In the chaos, I was separated from the team. I managed to escape, but I was injured." The sound of gunfire echoed through the building, much closer than before. The hostile force had reached their floor and was systematically clearing rooms as they advanced toward the Emergency Operations Center. "Sir," the lieutenant reported, "they've taken out the security checkpoint at the East Corridor. They'll be here in less than 60 seconds. Morrison grabbed a rifle from a weapons locker and handed another to Sarah. "Can you use this?" Sarah took the weapon and performed a functions check with movements so automatic and precise that everyone in the room stopped to watch. She inspected the rifle, checked the ammunition, and adjusted the sights with the fluid efficiency of someone who had done it thousands of times. "I think so," she said, though her hands had just demonstrated expertise that far exceeded anything taught in basic training. The sound of approaching footsteps could now be heard in the corridor outside. Morrison positioned his people defensively, while Sarah found herself automatically taking a position that would provide optimal fields of fire for multiple approach routes. "General," she whispered, "there's something else I remember. The person who betrayed the Black Talon team. I think I figured out who it was before the ambush, and I think that's why my memory was suppressed. The information I discovered was too dangerous to allow me to remember." "Who was it?" Before Sarah could answer, the lights in the room suddenly went out, plunging them into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, casting everything in an eerie red glow. "They've cut main power," Morrison announced. "Everyone stay calm and maintain positions." In the red emergency lighting, Sarah's recovered tactical training took full control. She moved with silent efficiency to a position that provided cover while maintaining visibility of all possible entry points. Her breathing slowed, her heart rate dropped, and she entered the focused mental state that had once made her one of the most effective operatives in the military. The door to the Emergency Operations Center suddenly exploded inward, and smoke grenades followed immediately after. Within seconds, the room was filled with thick, choking smoke that made it impossible to see more than a few feet in any direction. Sarah heard Morrison shouting orders and the sound of his people moving to defensive positions, but she remained perfectly still, using her hearing to track the movement of the attacking force as they entered the room. Through her recovered training, she could identify at least 4 different individuals moving through the smoke with tactical precision. They were using noise discipline and coordinated movement that confirmed her earlier assessment. These were highly trained professionals. A voice called out through the smoke, speaking with a slight Eastern European accent. "Sarah Bennett, we know you are here. Surrender now and your friends will not be harmed." Morrison's voice responded immediately. "This is General Morrison, United States Army. You are attacking a military installation. Surrender immediately or face the consequences." "General Morrison," the accented voice replied, "we are not here for you or your soldiers. We want only the woman who destroyed our operation in Prague. Give her to us, and we will leave peacefully." Sarah felt the final pieces of her suppressed memories clicking into place. The mission in Prague, the betrayal, the ambush. Everything was coming back to her now, and with those memories came the knowledge of who had betrayed the Black Talon team. Moving silently through the smoke, Sarah worked her way toward a position where she could see one of the attackers. Through a gap in the smoke, she caught sight of a tall figure wearing tactical gear and carrying an assault rifle. But what stopped her cold was what she saw when the figure turned slightly. A distinctive scar running from his left ear to his jaw. She knew that scar. She had seen it before, during the Black Talon mission. The man with the scar was Viktor Kozlov, the lieutenant of the terrorist leader they had been targeting. She had wounded him during their escape from Prague, marking him with that scar. But Kozlov should have been in custody. Intelligence reports had confirmed his capture after the Black Talon operation, which meant that someone had arranged for his release. Someone who wanted the Black Talon operatives eliminated. "I remember everything now," Sarah whispered into her radio. "The betrayal, the leak, all of it." Morrison's voice came back through her earpiece. "Who was the leak?" Sarah took a deep breath before answering. The truth she was about to reveal would change everything. "The leak wasn't someone on our team or in our command structure. It was someone much higher up the chain, someone who had access to the highest levels of military intelligence." She paused, watching Kozlov's movement through the smoke as she prepared to take action. "General Morrison, the person who betrayed Black Talon was Deputy Director Richards of the Defense Intelligence Agency. He was selling classified information to the same terrorist network we were targeting. When he discovered that our mission might expose his activities, he arranged for us to be eliminated during extraction." The implications of this revelation hung heavy in the smoke-filled room. Richards was one of the most senior intelligence officials in the military, trusted with the nation's most sensitive secrets. "And now," Sarah continued, checking her rifle and preparing to engage the enemy, "he's sent Kozlov and his team to finish the job he started in Prague." Through her earpiece, she could hear Morrison coordinating with his people. But Sarah knew that conventional tactics wouldn't be enough against Kozlov's team. They were too well trained and too well prepared. But Sarah Bennett had advantages they didn't know about. She had studied these men during the original mission. She knew their methods, their weaknesses, and their operational patterns. Moving like a shadow through the emergency-lit room, Sarah began to systematically engage the hostile force using skills and knowledge that had been locked away in her mind for 18 months. The woman who had stood in the equipment line that morning asking for a rifle was gone. In her place was Black Talon Shadow 7, one of the deadliest operatives the military had ever trained. and she was ready to finish what had started in Prague.